emergency cases, it is urgent that patients receive medical attention from hospitals and clinics. However, there are some cases where immediate responses are not received. This is Earl Michael Kalika. Back in 2004, he was in a car accident and was taken at a nearby hospital in Parañaque.
Pagdating sa ospital, pagpasok sa emergency room, lahat ng tao nagugulat kasi dahil sa itsura ko, nakabukas yung ulo ko, tapos bali yung braso ko na parang nakalaylay lang siya halos sa paa ko na. Nahanap muna nila yung guardian ko kasi yung iba nakasikaso na dahil yung mga relatives naman nila taga Parañaque lang. Ay sa akin kasi taga Quezon City pa. Binalot lang yung sa ulo ko, binalutan ng telang puti yung ulo ko, tapos nilagyan lang ng karton yung dito ko, tapos binalutan din ng tela na pero hindi talaga dito yung bali ko, dito yung bali ko. Parang nilagyan lang nila dito na hindi naman nakakatulong. Tapos kinunan nila ako ng dugo nun, pero dapat hindi kasi nauubusan na nga ako ng dugo kasi nanginginig na ako nun eh. Nanginginig na ako, gumaganyan-ganyan na yung kamay, yung yung iba na yung pakaramdam ko nun. Tapos punong-puno na talaga ng dugo. So, basta ang sa akin, yung kinakausap ko yung mga nurse, yung mga tao doon, sabi lang nila, tawagan ko raw yung guardian ko at doon lang daw nila ako maasikaso. Siyempre, kawawa yung pasyente dahil hindi rin naman nila ginusto yun. At siyempre, wala namang ibang tutulong. Saan ba sila tatakbo? Siyempre, sa ospital lang din. Sana higpitan din ng gobyerno yung mga yung ospital na hindi porket walang pera, hindi tatanggapin, hindi porket walang guardian. Dapat tanggap lang ng tanggap kasi buhay naman yan. Yun. Yung pera naman, pag-uusapan na lang sa hulihan or may mga bagay-bagay naman na pwedeng pag-usapan na lang sa after magamot.
What are the policies and protocols of hospitals when it comes to treating patients, especially in emergency cases? What are the rights of the patients? Good evening, I am Attorney Karen Jimeno and you are watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News channel. This show is about making the law work for you by giving legal advice on topics that matter to you.
And I'm Attorney Rod Nepomuceno. Tonight, we will discuss your legal rights on the issue of hospital policies and protocols, what you need to know on how hospitals and clinics perform their duties to their patients and what laws protect patients from certain practices of some of them. Yeah, very interesting topic. I think it's just like last week, no?
This is also very relevant to a lot of people.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and we have already received questions from our viewers, so let's start answering a few of these questions. Our first question is from Mark, and he asks us via Twitter, what are the laws that protect patients? Do we have a patient's Bill of Rights, and who oversees it? Well, Mark, currently, we have no Bill of Rights for patients. There is a Philippine Medical Association Declaration of Rights of Patients, but this is not a law. They submitted this and presented this to the House of Representatives, but it hasn't become law as of now. But we do have laws that protect patients. One is Republic Act 9439, sorry, and Republic Act 8344. These two laws, one prohibits hospitals from refusing to discharge patients in case they are unable to pay the bills, the hospital bills. The other law is one that protects patients in case they are refused from being treated by hospitals in case of emergency or serious cases. So, and of course, there are also laws on damages in case you experience damages from the type of treatment that's given to you or lack of treatment or defective treatment by doctors or hospitals.
Yeah, so basically two situations there. No? Refusal of the hospital from admitting you and requiring a deposit or advance, and the other situation ngayong detention. So always remember that. So there are two laws basically to provide for that. No? And covers your rights on that. Now, our next question is from Rachel. Rachel wrote for us via Facebook. My father was sent to the hospital in Pasig City last week, and he was scheduled to be discharged last Saturday. Now, the hospital refuses to release my father unless we pay the remaining balance of 19,000 pesos. Now, do hospitals have the right to hold patients for a period of time because they cannot pay their bills in the full amount? And how can we settle this? What steps can we take to file a complaint or case against the hospital? Now, as mentioned by Karen, there is a law, 93 Republic Act
9439.
94.
Sorry, we always mix the numbers up.
Okay.
Yeah, 9439.
9439, which prevents hospitals from detaining patients. However, we have to qualify, because if there is an exception to that rule, to that law. Now, if you're in private rooms, basically you're not covered by that law. Now, we will talk to our guests later on to expound on this aspect of the law, no? Because of course, if you will argue it, if you are in a private room, then if you argue based on that exception, then you can be detained. But we'll clarify that with our guests a little later on. So
yes, and
third question. Yeah.
Our third question is from Wolf via Twitter. What are the penalties for hospitals who hold patients in hospitals for not settling their medical bills? Again, we're going back to Republic Act 9439, and this is the law that prohibits hospitals from refusing to discharge patients in case they cannot pay their bills. And the penalty for this, it makes it unlawful for hospitals to refuse to discharge patients in case they can't pay their bills, and the penalty is imprisonment from 1 month to 6 months, or a fine of 20,000 to 50,000 pesos, or both, fine and imprisonment. So it's a very heavy penalty pa rin. So beware also hospitals. But then again, we have our guest later, an undersecretary from the Department of Health, to explain kailan din talaga this law will apply, because it does not apply all the time, that you cannot basically claim all the time that you have to be discharged in case you cannot pay your bills. So we'll clarify this later on.
All right. Okay, so time to take a short break?
Yes.
Okay.
Legal Help Desk will return after these reminders. You are still watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel. And now we are joined by our guest. He's an undersecretary from the Department of Health, and he is Undersecretary Ted Herbosa. Good evening, Undersecretary.
Good evening, Attorney Karen.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Attorney Rod.
Very interesting topic for
Yes,
today.
very
Yes, indeed.
interesting.
Yes, indeed.
And actually, before we started, after the commercial, Undersecretary Herbosa was giving us a useful tip. Kasi kanina nga, di ba, we keep mixing up the numbers for these laws. But then there's really no short title for it. But then I guess to help also our viewers to remember these laws, Undersecretary was saying they have
we call it the
terms for
anti-hospital detention
Yeah,
law.
anti-hospital detention law.
And the other one is the no deposit law.
No deposit
Yeah,
law.
no deposit
Which
law.
there was a previous law before that, right?
Correct. Well, it's a
BP.
presidential decree. It was
Yes,
a presidential decree, and then in '97 they actually passed a more consolidated law that covers being treated without having to pay for a deposit.
Right, and but there seems to be two aspects there. One is that the first one is that refusal. The act prohibits refusal of patients, and basically providing the appropriate initial medical treatment and confinement. No? And then the second part seems to be about the requiring of a deposit, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Well, the basic tenet there is that in emergency cases, healthcare cannot be withheld to the citizen, whether it's a public hospital or a private hospital. So the first thing to determine is if it is an emergency. And the law defines it very clearly, that it is an emergency if there is a life-threatening condition or something that can cause a permanent disability. Okay. So in conditions, sometimes the perception of patients and the diagnosis of doctors do not jive or collaborate.
Yeah.
Some would think because they have a wound in their head that's big and bloody, they think they're dying because of all the blood in their face. But to a doctor who sees that every day in an emergency room, It's just blood. I cover it, and then
Yeah.
you do some other thing.
Just like our
A
case
patient-
study for today, would you consider that an emergency case?
Yes, that is an
Yeah.
emergency because he had signs of shock. He was shivering, and
was losing a lot
he
of
was losing a
blood.
lot of
Yeah.
blood. So I'd consider that a life-threatening condition, and there's no need to actually wait for the someone else, a relative or a guardian, before they start treating. That I think is in violation of the principle that this is an emergency. He had a broken arm. He had a massive laceration in his forehead. He could die from losing a lot of blood.
Yes. So they should have treated him even
But-
if he could not give a deposit
Correct,
or
correct. What he
payment
was
right
wrong
away.
about was it was wrong for them to take blood. They need to take blood because they need to type
know,
it, and if he
yes.
needs blood transfusion,
Yeah.
they would be able to
Yeah.
give
But
him
then
the
it was
correct type.
surprising kasi even the way they treated the arm, they were putting the cardboard on the wrong arm. So
Yeah.
that's actually a different cause of action, right?
Yeah,
He
I
can
think-
file a complaint for damages,
Yeah.
I guess, if for the wrong treatment,
Correct.
right? For giving,
That's more on the practice of medicine. And trauma cases, the one what was described, are oftentimes they miss some injuries because of the tendency. For example, they get distracted with the injury that's more obvious, which is the bloody forehead. So they miss out the fracture, which is a closed, no wound,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and they don't know which is painful, whether it's this or this, because the whole body is painful.
Well, just for our audience, we don't have a malpractice law at the
Yeah.
moment, right?
We do. We
Oh,
We
okay.
actually, yes, there has been case. The Supreme Court has actually filed cases against malpractice, res ipsa loquitur. I think there was an obstetrician in one province that was fined by the Supreme Court for leaving gauze and the instruments within the
Alright.
belly. So we do have a malpractice law. Unfortunately, they never prosper in court because in the Philippines there is a very personal relationship
yeah.
between the doctor
so
and the
no one
patient.
wants to testify against.
Not
as an
really,
expert
no one wants to
witness?
testify. People testify, but they settle it out of court.
Mm.
So the doctor knows, and the lawyers will advise the doctor just pay off the family and.
But
they
it's
settle.
usually a case for damages lang.
Correct,
It's
correct.
Not really
Well, we don't have the one like the one in the states.
the one in the states
Yeah.
where malpractice suits.
They'll have damages and very high numbers. That's why the doctors in the U.S. hate the lawyers.
I know. Now let's answer a few more questions, Doc. Yusek, questions from our viewers with the help of course, Undersecretary Arbosa here. Our first question comes from Carlos, and he asks via Facebook: do hospitals really need the consent of the legal representative of the patient before they tend to them? What if the patient is conscious, of sound mind, and of legal age? What if he or she is in need of immediate medical attention? Yeah.
Well, you have to define what has to be done. If it is a major operation where the patient has to be put into anesthesia, a consent has to be taken
From the patient.
from the patient,
Yeah.
or from, if the patient is not of age, from a parent. However, if the patient is dying or is not conscious, there is what is called an implied consent.
Okay.
So when a patient brings himself to the emergency room at the throes of dying and then collapses at the door, that's already an implied consent. And the doctors can treat that patient on that concept that he brought himself to the emergency and he wants to be treated, and you should perform whatever needs to be done as a life
So in
saving.
emergency cases, if they do not administer the required help because they waited and wanted to get consent, that can be negligent?
Yes,
Okay.
that can be considered negligence. And well, in negligence, there are several things that need to be violated: the duty to treat,
Yes.
the duty to diagnose, the duty to inform, and harm has to happen.
Okay.
So if all those things are violated, you will win the case of negligence.
Now, can you refuse a patient, let's say your medical facility or your clinic is not equipped with the proper medical machines,
Yes.
or medical expertise to treat that patient? You
So,
can, right?
yeah, what happens there is the doctors are required to do what is called stabilization procedures.
All right.
You stabilize what can be done at the level of that hospital. For example, that patient in the beginning where he had lots of blood loss, you can give him IV fluids and transfer him to a hospital that can operate his forehead. So that requires policies not required by law. We have what we call the referral or transfer of emergency patients. And this is covered by an administrative order from the Department of Health. So that's short of an RA, but it covers all hospitals. So
So-
in that particular case, the doctor treating in that under level facility should contact a higher level facility and arrange for the transfer.
And he won't be liable for refusing that patient.
No,
Effect,
because
yeah.
he's done the right thing.
Yeah, to
he's done the
stabilize.
right thing, that his capability to treat this patient is deficient, and he needs to transfer this to a higher level facility. And he needs to arrange that. If he doesn't arrange that, then he's liable for some level of negligence.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you. We have currently a caller waiting online. And this is a question. This question is from another caller, Kim. Can we put her online now?
Yes, hi, good evening.
Yes, so she's here.
Hi,
Hi,
Thank
Kim.
you.
Hi, I would just like to ask, I want to know if it is possible to file a case against a hospital and its staff, and what would be the grounds applicable in filing a case, and who handles cases like these?
That's a very good question, Kim. For cases wherein it's the staff, meaning the doctors or nurses, we actually file complaints against the Professional Regulations Commission. There is the Board of Medicine for doctors, and there is the Board of Nursing for nursing personnel, etc.
And this is for all types
of the staff, the medical staff.
Yeah, if you have a complaint
against the staff.
a
You
staff
don't
or
feel that
one of
the
the
doctor
doctors.
treated you well. Like in that case in the beginning of this show, you were showing some patient who was not happy. He can file a complaint against the PRC, Professional Regulation Commission.
If the complaint is to the doctor.
The complaint is to the professional. Okay. If the complaint is against the hospital,
The
detaining
hospital
them, they go to the Department of Health. The Department of Health is the regulatory body for hospitals and health facilities. So we give out their licenses, we give out their penalties, and we monitor the standards of care in all health facilities in the country, public and private.
See.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Now from Twitter, Andrada asks, my mother died while undergoing an operation 2 years ago. The hospital didn't allow her to be released unless we settle our bill in full. Are they allowed to do this?
Well, you mentioned this. This is the 94, 93,
Yes,
the
the
anti-detention
anti-detention.
law, and it includes corpses. They cannot detain the corpse as well of patients who have died in that hospital. What some hospitals do as a policy is to not release the death certificate, because the death certificate is signed by a doctor. But however, they have had some problems with this policy because some would go to the municipal health officer or the city hall, and they're able to get their own death certificate from that. So that creates problems.
But Undersecretary, I'd like to bring up a question also related to this bill, to this law, the anti-detention law. It says there that this does not cover patients who stayed in private rooms. So in that case, if for instance the mother of Andrada stayed in a private room and they still refuse to release the body, can they still complain about this hospital?
Yes, they can still complain, because the principle of the anti-detention law is no one should be detained for non-payment of bills. And it follows contractual agreement, tort agreements, because when you enter a hospital as a private patient, it's actually a contractual agreement that you agree to pay all the bills.
Yes.
So if you're unable to do that, you are reneging on your part.
Yeah, it's a breach of
It's
contract.
a breach of the
Yes,
contract
yeah.
of payment. So the other side has some rights as well. The hospital, the private hospital, has some rights as well. And this is why I think the law had to balance, because if they did this, what would have happened is private hospitals would have closed and not operated anymore. And that wouldn't be good for healthcare, because then we'd run down the business of healthcare from the private sector. And as you know, public hospitals cannot cope with the population and the numbers. So I think they weighed that in how to implement and write up that law. So for those that go in as private patients, I think they understand clearly what they have to pay for. In fact, they should ask. If they're knowledgeable, they should ask, how much will I pay, or what is the idea?
Now, are you monitoring hospitals to make sure that their patients are duly informed? Are there requirements on information like posters,
Correct,
or bulletin boards?
Because of the anti-detention law, we've had several complaints of this and misunderstanding and abuse of the law from both sides, from the patient and from the hospital. So some of the things we're looking at is really making out a guideline for hospitals to actually post their price list of rooms, of procedures, of operations available to patients. Just like when you go to a restaurant, you know
have
what
a
is the
menu
price of
of
the
the-
menu of the food
Yeah.
you'll order. So you won't say, I ordered this, I didn't know it was this expensive. I'm not gonna pay for it.
Yeah.
So it's something like, you know that if you go to a suite room, you're going to pay for this much, and if you go to a ward, you're going to pay only this much.
Okay. Now, on a practical side, Doctor Yusek, there are penalties for it if let's say my relative is refused. But at that particular point, I know there are legal remedies after.
Correct.
You can complain or whatever. But at that particular point, can you insist? No, you have to accept. You have to accept this, otherwise you're going to be liable. In other words, can you insist right there and then in the ER? No, you have to take in my relative, or you have to take in my friend, or whatever.
Correct. You can actually insist, and that is within their right, because you go to that hospital, you go to that emergency room seeking treatment. If they are unable to provide it, that is reneging, or that's partly refusal of care.
So what
And
can they do
that's
at
against
that
law.
point? Do they call a DOH hotline, or
Kung
what do they
ayaw
do?
talaga
kung
silang
ayaw talaga.
tanggapin, yeah.
Well, if they should transfer to another hospital, I think they will not get the best care for that relative there. So the best option is to make them sign a piece of paper that you make them sign, you're refusing to treat my mother. No one will sign.
Yeah, I'm sure no one
No
will
one will
sign
sign,
this, yeah.
because that's exactly what I want to see. A doctor see my mother. So
Yes, yeah.
and if you tell me there's no doctor, then that's already negligence. And then afterwards they can file a complaint with us. But I think for purposes of the emergency, I think it's better off to just go to the next hospital that's nearest and try to save your relative there.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, that's we have very few minutes left, so I think I just want to make it clear to our viewers, like, one, the situation we're in, if they have unpaid bills in the hospital, even assuming they stayed in a private room, what can they do? One, they really can insist that they be discharged from the hospital.
Correct.
And if they are not, kasi I know it's really, we have laws on this, but if they're really there and ayaw talaga silang paalisin, what can they do? Can they call, ask assistance from the DOH?
Yes, they can
or?
ask assistance from the DOH, and many people have done this, and I've assisted many in my term as undersecretary. And what has happened is we call the hospital administration. The hospital directors usually give in to our request. I guess they know we are the regulatory body. So they give in to the request, and my usual arrangement is, if they're in a private room, to give in a post-dated check, basically, or as the law says, mortgage something like a land title or a car registration.
A promissory note.
And the promissory note assigned when they will pay or some even make an arrangement of installment payments for especially for large bills. And they usually get an understanding. What the hospitals want is that they really should get paid back for the services that they rendered. And
So in real practice, no medical practitioner has really gone to jail for this, right? I mean, in reality.
None yet. We've never
far.
suspended the hospital, and we've really not had a doctor or.
So it seems that at least the regulation of the DOH is working in this sense. But I've also had some questions.
The mediation of the DOH.
Yes, the
Because most of the
mediation.
time it's only mediation.
Yes.
And if the patient still doesn't have redress, we refer them to PAO, to the Public Attorney's Office, and they usually, when a lawyer writes, they start to give in again.
Okay.
Now, how come
Did you
there
have-
are some hospitals now that do not allow promissory notes? Is that allowed?
Well, the law states that the hospital will write their own guidelines on payments of bills, and some of them would put no promissory note. That means you'd have to do something else. Some have taken in cell phones or as a deposit. They described it as a pawn shop, and they've also complained to us. They've also complained, and
but that's not. I don't think that's allowed under the law. I mean, because
It's
again,
not.
if you have,
we stopped it. Actually.
yeah, if you have a patient not staying in a private room, then they should be allowed to issue promissory notes according to the law. Right? So they can complain. Does DOH have a hotline for this?
Well, they can call the regular landline of the Department of Health during office hours, and we have a bureau in charge of this, the Office of Legal Services.
Now, this question is from left field, Doc. Let's say I have an HMO. Obviously, they won't refuse me, right? If I have an HMO and it's an accredited HMO, can I make an argument that, let's say I'm paying my PhilHealth, and PhilHealth normally guarantees a portion of my payment? Is that a possible down payment, so to speak?
Actually, we've already implemented that with the
Okay.
poor.
All
You
right,
know,
okay.
the national government enrolled the poorest,
Yeah.
and we said that they have no balance billing when they go to the public hospital, and only their PhilHealth will be billed. So technically, we're doing that in public hospitals.
Okay.
In the private hospital, that is not yet a policy. So we do hope some of the private hospital owners
Will
will
start
join in on that and
implementing
say,
this.
if they have a PhilHealth membership that's current, then probably that's enough as a deposit because they will be reimbursed for the services rendered.
Undersecretary, I'm curious. So what if they finally get out of the hospital, but afterwards they are unable to pay the bill because, for instance, sir, they issued the checks but just because they're desperate to leave the hospital or take their relative out? What happens normally?
If they issue the check, I guess
Yeah,
it's staff.
of course, it's covered by the bouncing
And these
checks
hospitals
law.
have lawyers.
Yes,
These
yeah.
hospitals have lawyers and they go after you. They also have credit collectors. The hospitals have credit collectors who take a certain percentage of what they can, and they go to the houses and they
Okay.
collect.
So
they
this is
hire
also-
they hire credit collectors as well.
Yeah. So this is also a warning to those patients, someone who abuse the law,
Correct.
that they can be actually held liable if
Correct.
they
They
unable
can
to
be
pay.
held liable
Yeah.
because that's abuse of the business of that particular hospital when
Yeah.
you're trying to get free services when you should be paying for them.
Yeah.
Now, Yusek, do you have a DOH hotline that they can
Yeah, we do.
call?
It's
This
in our
is something-
website, but I don't memorize it.
Did you?
I
I'm sorry.
asked it earlier.
Sorry, because I'm curious. No? I probably didn't catch it kanina.
We do. We have a main trunk line. It's on our website. The website I have memorized, www.doh.gov.ph. And our contact numbers are actually there.
All right. All right. So that's all the time we have for tonight. We'd like to thank Undersecretary Bosa for joining us, sir. Thank you for explaining to us the protocols and policies of hospitals. I'm Attorney Rod Nepomuceno.
And I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. Join us again next Monday as we talk about your legal rights on the issue of rent. Good night.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, but thank you.